Hi everyone, my name is Callie Robinson, and this is an analytical report of genetically modified organisms for my technical writing class. So basically, what I'd like to discuss with you today is what is genetically modified organisms, why they exist in our world, and discuss with you how they're already being integrated into our agriculture industry and why we as consumers don't have to fear them. So, initially, according to livescience.com, a genetically modified organism, or GMO, is an organism that has had its DNA altered or modified in some way through genetic engineering. Now, all forms of breeding lead to some kind of genetic alteration. For example, through the breeding of different breeds of livestock. So, in cows, if you have a Hereford and an Angus, you might have a calf that has a white face but a black body. It's the same kind of idea with genetically modified organisms, except this is a science. So it targets a specific trait and manipulates it for desired results. And in the plant and animal industry, these results sometimes vary. For example, in the plant industry, it's common for herbicide and pesticide resistance to be a desired trait. These are actually the two more common desired genetically altered traits. So essentially, why does this science exist? Why is it a thing to genetically alter the genetics of the different genes of animals and plants? Well, over the course of the next 35 years, our population will see a substantial increase. In fact, it'll increase by over 2 billion by the year 2050 alone. So, while a major problem for our food industry right now is distribution, in the future it's going to be whether or not we have enough food to eat to feed our population. So, in fact, by the year 2050, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, we'll actually have to produce 70% more food than we're producing right now, with less farmland and less resources to produce. So there's multiple alternatives to the use of genetically modified organisms for those who are afraid or for those who think they are unhealthy or dangerous to the environment. We could, of course, destroy valuable rainforests. That is an option. It really is, because at this point in time, we're running out of options to feed this ever-growing population. So in order to decrease or increase the amount of available farmland, we could, of course, destroy animals' wildlife habitats. But why we shouldn't do this should, of course, be self-explanatory, because it is destroying habitats of foreign animals. So we as an entire population could also decrease our consumption of meat, given that the amount of crop calories we utilize to feed livestock could essentially meet the calorie needs of 4 billion people. But that's next to impossible, especially since our meat consumption has actually quadrupled in the last 50 years. It's going to be nearly impossible to get everyone to stop eating meat and reduce the amount of crop calories we utilize to feed our livestock. So we could also invest more in hydroponics. And by hydroponics, I mean the growth of plants with no soil indoors. And there's no guarantee that we'll meet the adequate nutrients within our crops that we need to produce in order to efficiently feed a growing population with this is a niche market. It's not something that we're going to be able to make operate efficiently on a large scale. So, our last resort is, of course, to utilize genetically modified organisms. And as you can see here, the constant increase of the population up until 2048, it has just steadily increased from 1927 up until 2048 to the population number that we will reach by then. So, what crops are essentially considered genetically altered today? Well, there's a number of staple crops in the United States that is already almost 100% genetically altered here. So we have 85% of sugar beets genetically altered, 90% of canola, 90% of corn, and 93% of soybeans. The majority of all processed foods contain some sort of genetically modified organism, whether that is a genetically engineered sugar, which can be found in high fructose corn syrup, which also contains a large amount of genetically altered corn. So, given that there's so many different statistics and numbers that have to do with genetically modified organisms, so many large words that I continue to stutter over, there's many misconceptions amongst consumers, and it's really causing a gap between consumer and producer and the idea of from farm to plate, because there is that rift between consumer and producer and the amount of knowledge that we're able to retain about the agriculture industry and what they're trying to do to meet the needs of consumers. So here are the most common misconceptions among consumers about genetically modified organisms. The first is that they're dangerous and unhealthy. Genetically modified organisms are nutritionally and chemically identical to those of traditionally grown foods. In fact, the USDA and FDA, United States Department of Agriculture, and the Food and Drug Administration exhaustively test GMOs for a number of years before they're even being placed on the market to ensure that they are safe for consumers to consume. The second, genetically modified organisms are bad for the environment, when in fact, in 2009, GMOs helped farmers to reduce their CO2 emissions by nearly 39 billion pounds. That's the same as removing 8 million cars from the road for an entire year. Lastly, biotechnology is a new and unproven science. Biotechnology has essentially been around for roughly thousands of years. As long as agriculture has been utilized, biotechnology has been utilized. Genetically modified organisms are just simply an updated version of what farmers have been doing for years. Our ancestors have been genetically combining crops to make things like cheese, wine, bread, and beer. Modern day biotechnology just offers a simpler, more efficient way to accomplish the same goals that our forefathers were destined to do long ago with the utilization of the agriculture industry and providing for our ever-growing population. So essentially, the fact of the matter is, agriculture will always be a necessity to life, whether it's through the use of hydroponics, the elimination of rainforests, or the utilization of genetically modified organisms. And it's up to us as agriculture advocates to advocate for the farmer and for his endeavors to continue to protect our nation's food supply and our world's food supply. So the next time you have a question about genetically modified organisms, make sure that you look it up on a government website to ensure that the information is correct, because there are many people negating the idea of GMOs currently. It's important that you advocate for the farmer and advocate for the agriculture industry, because essentially this is the leading industry in the United States. It's the industry that keeps food in our mouth, clothes on our back, and a roof over our heads. Thank you.